Yeah, thank you so much. I am a PhD student at Purdue University. I grew up in Northwest Indiana, so I'm a Hoosier through and through. I am in Dr. Couture and Dr. Matt Ginsel's lab. I'm co-advised by both. It's a new thing. Um, okay, so I'm just gonna talk to you guys a little bit about spotted lanternfly and kind of add some stuff that's really important now that it's in Indiana. And then later in the presentation, I'll talk more about my research and what I'm currently doing. Okay, so spotted lanternfly is a phloem-feeding plant hopper and it's native to Asia. It arrived in Berks County, Pennsylvania in 2014 on stone shipments, and it's a major threat to vineyards, orchards, and forests. Spotted lanternfly overwinter as egg masses, and then they emerge in the spring, probably right around within the next month or so. And then in native ranges, tree of heaven is their preferred host plant. But in the United States, it seems that they will switch hosts throughout the growing season. So when understanding and studying an invasive species from my perspective, I feel like it's really important to kind of understand the traits that the insect has that makes it a successful invader, because that can kind of pinpoint some ways to control their spread or kind of control populations later on. And one thing about spotted lanternflies is that they have these inconspicuous egg masses. And this is a picture I took of one in Pennsylvania when I was doing some research out there, and it really just looks like smeared mud. And since they really will lay these egg masses on any surface they like, and so sometimes that will be trains and cars. So that allows them to hitchhike with you, to travel really far distances and spread to new places. They also have a very wide host range. So if they get to a new environment, odds are there will be a tree there or a plant there that they'll like. And if not, tree of heaven is planted throughout the United States. You can see it a lot on roadways. So they at least have that. And as these transports of goods or travel becomes more frequent, it will probably lead to more outbreaks. Spotted lanternfly also has no natural enemies in the United States. And they can actually be considered toxic at times because they show evidence of sequestering these toxic compounds that they get from tree of heaven. It's similar to how monarchs get these toxic compounds called cardinaloids from milkweed. It kind of aids in protection as they grow. Now, their life history, I mentioned they switched hosts, so I'm going to kind of illustrate that now. So right now, they're probably either eggs or starting to hatch into the first instar nymphs. The first, second, and third instars, I like to call them Dalmatian weevils. And if you don't know what a weevil is, it's a beetle that has a snout like these, like you can see on here. Um, but yeah, they can be really small. I know the first instars are very small, kind of hard to miss, or easy to miss, I mean. And you'll mainly find these feeding on black walnut. Although if black walnut's not there, they could be on other tree species too. And then as they start to go into this fourth instar with the red coloration into adults, they'll be primarily on Tree of Heaven. And then as Tree of Heaven starts to lose its leaves in the fall, they will go to maples. And then at any time point throughout this, they can be found feeding on grapes, which is a concern because the grape industry is very important for making wine. Now, geographically, they are native to Asia, like I said. And when spotted lanternfly first came to the United States, authorities had a really good handle on trying to control the spread and knowing how detrimental the species could be, because it was first identified as an invasive pest in South Korea in 2004 and then Japan in 2009. So there was some research out kind of describing how prolific it can be. And then in 2014, it came to the United States on those stone shipments that I mentioned earlier, and it has the potential to survive throughout other parts of the world. But I would like to note that this model and the one I'll show you next are kind of based on more climate factors. So it just has the temperatures that spotted lanternfly need to survive. Now, in the United States, so when I first started studying spotted lanternfly in 2021, I was making my slides for my committee meetings and my presentations and everything. And spotted lanternfly was only found in, I think, like 12 states. So over the last couple of years, it's jumped up to 17, which is kind of crazy. And it seems like these new states are being added every fall. And then also climate models suggest that it can survive throughout most of the United States. So really areas in the Midwest. And then also there's the tiny little, or not tiny, but the section in California right around where Napa would be, which is a cause for concern to protect the grapes there. Now in Indiana, so I made these maps in ArcGIS, and spotted lanternfly is found in 6 counties in Indiana, actually. I did not add it. It's also found in Allen County. So the red counties are where they are currently located. And you can kind of see how maybe this spread was enabled, especially in Northwest Indiana. There's a lot of railways, a lot of roadways. I know in Elkhart that the infestation that broke out in that county has a direct line to a railway in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So these likely spread through that. And this is just something kind of important to keep in mind when you're traveling throughout Indiana this summer, maybe especially late in maybe August and September and October, to really make sure that you're not bringing any spotted lanternfly back with you or to the place you're traveling. Now, in the United States, there's been a lot of economic damage of about 3 billion from in grape, tree fruit, and ornamental industries. Then they can also potentially lower home values in urban areas with high infestation. I'm kind of starting to connect the dots that this aesthetic quality that they are affecting is similar to how spongy moth outbreaks were very I they were gross. I mean, like the caterpillars were dropping their frass on the ground, and it was just not something you wanted. I'd say that that's the threat that spotted lanternfly has in urban areas or neighborhoods and stuff. They can really just it's not a pleasant sight to see a lot of spotted lanternfly on a tree. And then they'll make cause this their honeydew excretion will get moldy and cause the trees to turn black like this picture. And a lot of wasps will swarm around, so it's just kind of something that you wouldn't want, I guess. And then in terms of plant damage, when there's high infestation, there's a lot of loss of carbohydrates, so then that makes them more susceptible to other pests, diseases, and then also drought or other things like that. And then trees will wilt, and then there's also this moldy understory from the honeydew. I know from my experience in Pennsylvania, when we'd go to parks and walk around, and we would see spotted lanternfly infestations, and it seemed like earlier in the summer, they were really just kind of maintained on one branch of a large tree. But that branch throughout the year or the summer would just slowly start getting more and more brown and wilty and just not a very pleasant sight. So now specifically in Indiana, what's at risk? What do we have here? Well, there are 30 vineyards in Indiana, and there's about 270 acres of planted vineyards. And this is kind of important because like you can treat your vineyard with pesticides, but if there's a forest surrounding the vineyard, spotted lanternfly are so smart that they will leave the vineyard to the surrounding forest and just hang out in the forest until that pesticide potency has worn off, and then they'll go back to feeding on the grapes. And they have been shown to kill grapevines through one season of feeding. And then we also have a large hardwood forest region in Indiana. There's a lot of black walnut that's important for vineyard quality wood. I know a lot of black walnut plantation owners who are very eager to help us with kind of identifying spotted lanternfly in their area just to protect their crops. And then there's also that aesthetic value to neighborhoods or to urban areas. Again, it's just not a pleasant sight. And spotted lanternfly, if you haven't ever seen one in person, they're pretty big. And when they jump around, it's kind of like a frog. And it can be kind of scary when one's just like jumping at you. So it's not something you would necessarily want again. So now in the United States, like I mentioned earlier, these authorities did a really good job of setting up quarantine zones and trying to limit spread in and out of counties or states now. And then there's also some chemical management, a lot of chemical management, the use of pesticides that I mentioned earlier for things like vineyards. There's biological control. So I know many researchers in Virginia have been looking at getting their native um natural enemy like from Asia to bring it here, and it's gone through a lot of testing, and they have released some little parasitoid wasps that attack the egg masses. um but this is just kind of a slower process because it has to go through so much so many, they have to get approved at each stage of research for this. And then there's also mechanical management, which really just is crushing egg masses, squishing a spotted lanternfly when you see it. It's a lot of outreach from the public to help with this. But one thing spotted lanternfly for management that hasn't really been studied is management, or sorry, detection strategies. And that's kind of what I do. So to add some more background for you guys, I got my undergrad degree from Purdue. I studied ecology, evolution, and environmental biology. I got that in 2022. And then in 2023, I received my master's degree in the entomology department. And then I started my PhD in FNR right after. So I truly bleed black and gold. I love Purdue. It's a great place. And for my master's, I was looking at changes in tree canopy spectral and chemical profiles and properties in response to spotted lanternfly infestations. I will be talking about that on the next slide. But then for my PhD, I'm trying to build on that work and scale up to more landscape levels to predict spotted lanternfly movement and try to get ahead of their infestations to better manage them. So first, I can kind of talk about spectral data. It's what I work with. So I like to think about it like a camera. It's all about images. So when we take a picture of a leaf or anything with our phone, we get back what we see as a leaf. And that's because our phones have three channels: red, blue, and green. But when I use my hyperspectral sensor, my device, it basically takes a picture of the leaf, but instead of just looking at it through three channels, I look at it through 1024 channels. And so I get to see the light reflected in this wavelength range. And this wavelength range would be called the spectral profile of the leaf. And so different areas along this wavelength range kind of mean different things in terms of what's going on with the plant. And so my whole goal for my master's was to see, can we use spectral data? Can it pick up on spotted lanternfly infestations? And can that be applied to higher levels? So yes, the spectral profile is just a snapshot of the plant's physiochemical status. If there's changes in the plant's physiochemical status, there will be changes in that plant spectral profile. And that's kind of, we can pick up on those changes in the spectral profile when we compare trees without any lanternfly to trees with lanternfly. So these approaches for detection can detect more suitable habitats and also detect tree responses to pests. This has been shown in other systems like potato blight and potatoes, corn rootworm in corn. And for my master's, I found that common host tree species spectral profiles change in response to feeding. So I was able to detect differences in black walnut, river birch, red and silver maple, and willow trees. Now, Tree of Heaven is a long and difficult story for me. I've tried a lot of things to be able to truly see if I can detect any infestation in Tree of Heaven. And it wasn't until this past fall that we kind of realized the spectral data does pick up on a response to SLF, to lanternfly feeding. But as the season goes on and lanternfly feeding is reduced, the spectral profiles aren't changing. So that would kind of suggest that Tree of Heaven has some sort of legacy effect to spotted lanternfly feeding. And it kind of makes sense based off of their evolutionary history. I mean, they are it's spotted lanternfly's preferred host plant in Asia, and they kind of, I like to say it's like they grew up together. They're like siblings. They know how each other work. They're kind of trying to beat each other. But yes, being able to detect it in these other tree species can help us bridge that knowledge gap of detection strategies. So for my PhD, I kind of wanted to build off of that and use landscape variables, SLF life history traits, host quality, and then also satellite data to detect and predict lanternfly infestations, which would allow us to implement these mitigation strategies before infestations get out of control. So it's kind of trying to get ahead of them, one up them, really just to let authorities be prepared for what will happen, because eventually spotted lanternfly will spread. It's just a matter of how can we reduce their impact. So the kind of landscape variables that I would use include like forest composition, their host tree species if they're in that area. Like Indiana has a lot of cornfields, but we also have a lot of forested areas. So that's important to take into account. The life history traits of spotted lanternfly. What are they feeding on at each instar? Can we know we can detect it in a couple of tree species, but can that be detectable from like satellites? And then also host quality. Really, how does host quality impact spotted lanternfly success? We know they seek out higher quality hosts, but living in Indiana, especially in southern Indiana, we know there's a lot of periodical droughts, and really, how are those things going to affect spotted lanternfly's decision on where they'll go? And then, yeah, the satellite data, I can look at imagery on and compare basically the greenness of an area before and after infestations. And I can also kind of target certain areas that I trap at for lanternfly to get a better idea of exactly what's happening, have certain counts and everything. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now is I'm trapping for spotted lanternfly in Indiana. These are two of my lab mates in the picture. They helped me set up a lot of traps. And then this is in the middle kind of, it's called a circle trap, and the this is all that I'm setting up are just these circle traps. And the idea is that spotted lanternfly will crawl up the tree and get caught in the net, and then they can't go and feed, and they'll eventually die in the enclosure. And so, based off of spotted lanternfly's spread from last summer, living in Lafayette, sorry, I wanted to see how we could, if we could find any spotted lanternfly from between Huntington and Indiana, because there is a major railway that goes right in here. And that's really what I was focusing on and targeting. And luckily, I didn't catch anything in my traps, even though there were very suitable habitats for them and a way to get to these places along the way. So this summer, I am trapping, focusing more up in Northwest Indiana, and trapping in places that we hopefully don't find them, but if we do find them, we can respond pretty quick. I'd also like to mention that my lab mate, she's not in one of these pictures, but she's also studying spotted lanternflies, specifically trapping for them. And there are these new traps being talked about. They're called lampshade traps, and they target egg masses, spotted lanternfly egg masses. So it's a like roofing material, like the rough roofing material wrapped around the tree, and then another one above it to kind of look like a lampshade. And we tried some out last summer or last fall, and we got a lot of eggs, a lot. So it's a very promising approach for it. And it's also data that I can use to compare her trap sites, my trap sites, compare the greenness of the area before and after to kind of pinpoint what exactly spotted lanternfly are seeking out. So what currently, what a lot of us can do, since we can't really go out and smash every single spotted lanternfly, I think the best thing that we can do now is kind of monitor trees in your yard or in your city when you go on walks. Keep note if they're one of spotted lanternfly's preferred hosts, and kind of just keep an eye on them. You can also inspect your cars for egg masses before and after travel. So if you're going to and from, just really check your car. I know they'll do it up in like the wheel well, and they're kind of that light pink color, look kind of like smeared mud. I think that's really important for everyone to be able to do. And also report any potential sightings, even if you aren't 100% sure if it is, take a picture of it and email the DEPP at dnr.in.gov or call them just to check. Really can't hurt to check. So yeah, really I think that the best thing we can do is just kind of stay alert for it and try to keep in mind we don't want it to spread. Do you guys have any questions? If you also have additional questions that I can't answer this is my email, Joel, Joll at purdue.edu. Or if you maybe have land in a certain area that you would like to have traps put on, I'd be more than happy to try to help and set some up. So yeah.
So I do have a couple questions myself. So I helped you this last summer use a drone to take a look at some tree of heaven. And I'm guessing that a lot of the information from it may have been a little bit limited in what you were able to get out of it without an actual extra sensor on the drone. Do you picture drones being of good use in studying spotted lanternfly in the future if they had the right stuff on them? Or do you think that bigger landscape scale with the satellite's going to work better?
I think I've been wondering that a lot lately because a drone would allow us to have a better idea of um it would be a easier bridge from the leaf level measurements that I took up to doing the drone because you can get closer and you can have a better idea of the canopy, especially if they had a hyperspectral sensor on it. And so for my work, I'm basing it off of satellite imagery from planet that have hyperspectral sensors on it. I honestly haven't had much work with it at all, but I think I'm learning that I wish I did have more drone flyovers of the area just to get a better idea of what's going on in this specific area.
So we do have a couple of questions that I see popping up in chat. So I see one asking what time of year would egg masses most likely be found?
So the egg masses are probably found. I've seen them as early as late August. But they're laid up until the spotted lanternfly die from the cold. So anywhere from August until May or June when they hatch. But new ones won't start appearing like after August. Like after August, that's probably if they're there, they're there. If they're not, they're not.
And then I see someone kind of following up similar question. What
Yeah.
time of year can you expect egg deposits on vehicles? And it would probably be a very, very similar time.
Yeah, very similar. And so the one thing that I've noticed is that around the time, so after they mate, the females have these really bloated stomachs and they look so much bigger, like in their abdomen. And so if you notice something, if you're like, wow, those are really big, like you check your car because they definitely have eggs in there.
I'll also pop in here since part of what I do is outreach. One of the things I tell people is they have yellow striped abdomens. If you see those yellow striped abdomens, that means that they either have a belly full of food or a belly full of eggs. See, we have a few additional questions too. So Emily Finch is from Sikkim, and she is saying here, are you looking for more places to set up traps? They have SISMAs who might be willing to help with some volunteering work. And I would definitely encourage you to take advantage of that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the places I'm trapping now are either like private landowners or nature preserves. So I know I couldn't like delegate people to go out and do it, but I would love to have people come along with me and check the traps. Or if you have certain areas where like, oh yes, this seems like a really good spot for spotted lanternfly. I'd love to trap there. I'm trying to do as much as I can, collect as much data as I can, really anything I would be grateful for.
So
Emily, if you email me, I would love to connect with you about that.
I'm going to jump you ahead a question here. Someone's asking if you could show the life cycle slide while answering the questions. And
Yes.
that probably, yeah, that'd be a huge help. I understand. We have a few more here. So someone is asking, in counties where spotted lanternfly have been found, are the infestation mainly in ag or landscaped areas or in natural areas?
Okay, that's a really good question. So as far as I know, I've had a lot of I feel like I've seen both sides of infestation. I've seen the new wave coming to Indiana, but I've also seen the new or the um old infestations in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, you can find them really anywhere there's trees or a park or forest or anything. But right now in Indiana, they're probably in very isolated areas where they were introduced. So this would probably be along railways, roadways, areas that they have their preferred hosts, that kind of thing. So probably in more landscaped areas or natural areas, not necessarily in ag. Unless you have a giant winery or vineyard, then I'd check that. Molly J is my mom. Hi, mom. She asked when do they mate? They mate in around August, basically as soon as they turn adults, anywhere from July to August, September.
And one thing I'll throw in there too is they can survive for quite a while depending on where they're at. For example, in southern Indiana, we still had living ones moving as late as November. That doesn't mean they were mating, but they were still
Mhm.
moving
Moving.
around. And then Vince Burkle, he is the nursery inspector located in northeastern Indiana and also the associate director of DEPP. His said spotted lanternfly hatched in Huntington on Tuesday. That's one of the original infestation sites that were found in Indiana for the last, I think, 3 years. So thank you for sharing that, Vince. I'm going to mark that down on my calendar. And also spongy moth, I got word hatched this last week too.
Mm.
Let's see. All right, I think those are the only questions. Ellie, I was gonna invite Vince since he's here, if he has anything he wanted to share with the audience too, because he was working with these directly kind of all the time. And if he has any new information he just want to share with everyone, Vince, please go ahead and feel free to do so.
All right. Can you guys hear me? I was just trying to figure out how to get myself unmuted here.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, great. Well, uh, yeah, thanks for inviting me on, and Ellie, great job. I just wanted to throw out there that this we've got some real concerns about this insect. It's just because of its wide host range and the fact that it's really loves to hitchhike and it's very cryptic as well. It will get any place and hitch a ride. Um, be on the lookout for this, especially in the northern tier of counties, because we have a main Norfolk Southern rail line that runs from basically Butler, Indiana, through Kendallville and up to Goshen, Elkhart, and over to Chicago. Um, that's where we're really starting to find it pop up. And there's about 100 trains a day that go back and forth on that line with a major rail yard in Elkhart, which is where we found it in Elkhart. And we're finding it popping up in little spots here and there, maybe an insect here, an insect there that we noticed last year along that line. So if you're in any of those counties, in that northern tier, DeKalb, Noble, and then up into Elkhart, St. Joe, LaPorte, Porter, and Lake County. All those are areas where we're expecting it probably to pop up this year again, as well as any other county that has a major rail line going through it that has quite a bit of traffic on it. We are planning to do some treatments in Huntington this year to try to suppress the insects from spreading out. And since we just got hatch on Tuesday, our egg scraping efforts are pretty much done there. But this year we've destroyed 23,000, almost 24,000 egg masses in Huntington. So that's quite a bit of insects that aren't going to hatch this year, but there's still going to be quite a bit more that do. Just because they piles of rocks, old tires, anything on the ground, trash, 2x4s, they're going to be hiding their eggs underneath that. So And again, as Ellie said, if you see anything, even if it's an insect that looks like spotted lanternfly, which there are several, please report it to our website, DEPP, or our email, I'm sorry, DEPP@in.gov, or you can call one of the local inspectors directly as well.
So we got another question that popped in too. I see Jill's asking, do we need cold temperatures each winter to achieve large die-off?
So yeah, we do need cold temperatures to achieve that, to like have the adults die off. But if they didn't die off from the cold temperatures, they'd just probably die later from old age. But the region we live in, and all of those predicted, the climate models that I showed all have the minimum and maximum temperatures required for lanternfly survival. Like I know they couldn't live in Florida because it would be too warm, because they need a certain number of cold days in order to become adults, like, or in order to hatch after egg masses, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the spotted lanternfly, the environment that they originate from is very, very similar to our environment. So while we get really cold winters here in Indiana, their life cycle is going to complete. They're going to be able to make it through. But Ellie is very correct. If they went somewhere like Florida, the temperatures there would be far too warm for far too long for them to properly complete a life cycle because their bodies are built to experience winter. Right. Ellie, can you think of anything else you'd like to share with the group?
Um, no, but thank you, Bob, for having me and asking me to do this. It was a great experience. Um, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, like I said, I really would love to keep introducing more of our audiences to the people who are getting their careers going and researching these things. So, because you're the ones who are going to be kind of leading the future on this. But I don't see any more questions. So, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. You guys are going to receive a recording link, and those of you on YouTube, hi, thank you for watching. Feel free to comment. And with that, thanks everybody, and go and enjoy your days.